In the depths of space, where empires rise and fall like cosmic dust, one truth echoes through the galaxy: humans are nothing special. They're janitors, laborers, the forgotten species that cleans up after their betters. But Marcus Chen, a single father scrubbing floors on the most feared alien dreadnought in the galaxy, is about to shatter that perception forever. When the blind daughters of the galaxy's most ruthless alien queen discover that their new human caretaker isn't just teaching them to navigate darkness, he's teaching them to see hope, everything changes. Because sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or military might. Sometimes, it's a father's love extending beyond his own species. The queen thought she was hiring disposable help. She had no idea she was inviting revolution into her home. Marcus Chen pressed his palm against the cold metal bulkhead of the alien dreadnought, feeling the massive ship's engines pulse through the hull like a mechanical heartbeat. 6 months ago, he had been an unemployed engineer on Earth, struggling to pay for his daughter Emma's medical treatments. Now he was 3,000 light-years from home, mopping floors for the Valdari Empire's most feared military commander. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had applied for every engineering position in human space, desperate to find work that paid enough for Emma's gene therapy treatments. Instead, he ended up as a janitor on Queen Zarathal's flagship, the Crimson Dominion. The pay was extraordinary by human standards, enough to fund Emma's treatments for years, but the cost was seeing his 8-year-old daughter only through video calls that took weeks to transmit across the void. Marcus squeezed out his mop and continued down the corridor, his reflection distorted in the polished obsidian walls. The Valdari had built their ship like a temple to intimidation, all sharp angles and blood-red lighting that made everything look like it was bleeding. He had learned to navigate these halls in the early hours when most of the crew slept, finding peace in the repetitive work and the silence. The Valdari were tall, insectoid beings with 4 arms and compound eyes that missed nothing. They treated humans like useful pets at best, vermin at worst. Marcus had quickly learned to keep his head down, do his job efficiently, and avoid drawing attention. The contract was for 2 years, and he could endure anything for Emma's sake. He was cleaning near the restricted residential section when he heard it, a sound that made his heart clench with recognition. Crying. Not the clicking, chittering sounds of Valdari distress, but something softer, more familiar. Something that reminded him of Emma when she had nightmares about her condition. Marcus paused, looking around the empty corridor. The residential section was strictly off-limits to service staff, but the sound was coming from just beyond a partially open door. He should walk away. He should mind his own business and finish his shift. But the crying continued, and it sounded so young, so lost. Setting his mop bucket aside, Marcus approached the door carefully. Through the gap, he could see a large chamber decorated with what looked like children's furniture, though scaled for beings much larger than human children. 2 young Valdari sat on the floor, their smaller forms suggesting they were juveniles. But something was wrong with their eyes, they were clouded over, unseeing. The children were blind. One was trying to comfort the other, making soft clicking sounds that Marcus somehow understood as soothing words. They had knocked over what looked like a puzzle, its pieces scattered across the floor in a pattern that spoke of frustration and defeat. Marcus felt his father instincts override his survival instincts. Before he could stop himself, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Hey," he said softly in the trade language he had been studying. "Are you okay?" Both children went rigid, their head crests flaring in fear. The older one, who couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 10 years old, quickly positioned herself in front of the younger child. "Who is there?" she demanded, trying to sound brave but failing to hide the tremor in her voice. "You are not supposed to be here." Marcus knelt down slowly, making himself less threatening. "My name is Marcus. I clean the corridors. I heard crying and wanted to help." "Humans are not allowed in our chambers," the younger child whispered. "Mother will be very angry." "I won't tell if you won't," Marcus said gently, looking at the scattered puzzle pieces. "What were you trying to do?" The older child's defensive posture relaxed slightly. "We were practicing with the spatial puzzle. But we cannot see the patterns, and the teaching aids are designed for those with sight." Marcus studied the puzzle pieces, recognizing them as a three-dimensional spatial reasoning toy. Emma had similar puzzles for her cognitive development. May I try something? I promise I won't hurt you. After a moment's hesitation, the older child nodded. Marcus gathered the pieces, then gently took the younger child's hands. Feel the edges, he said, guiding small fingers along the puzzle pieces. Each piece has a unique shape, and they fit together like a story. This piece has 3 smooth sides and 1 rough one. Where do you think it wants to go? For the next hour, Marcus worked with both children, teaching them to solve the puzzle through touch, sound, and spatial reasoning. He showed them techniques he had learned helping Emma navigate her own challenges, adapting them for their alien physiology. You are very different from what we were taught about humans, the older child said as they completed the puzzle together. We were told humans were simple creatures, good only for basic labor. Sometimes what we're told and what's true are very different things, Marcus replied. What are your names? I am Kira, the older child said. This is my sister Naya. We are the daughters of Queen Zarathul. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. He was in the private chambers of the most dangerous military commander in the galaxy, playing with her children. If he were discovered, he would be lucky if execution was quick. I should go, he said, starting to stand. Wait, Kara said quickly. Will you come back? No one has ever shown us how to learn like this before. Marcus looked at both children, seeing the hope in their expression despite their sightless eyes. They reminded him so much of Emma, bright, curious, but held back by circumstances beyond their control. I shouldn't, he said honestly. If your mother finds out. Please, Naya whispered. We get so lonely. The tutors try to teach us, but they do not understand. You made the puzzle make sense. Marcus felt his resolve crumble. These children needed help, and he knew what it was like to feel powerless to help your own child. Maybe he could make a difference here, even if it was dangerous. Okay, he said finally. But it has to be our secret. If anyone asks, you've never seen me before. Both children nodded eagerly, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced since leaving Emma. He had come to the stars to save his daughter, but perhaps he had also found children who needed saving. As he returned to his cleaning duties, Marcus didn't notice the security sensor in the corner of the children's chamber, its red light blinking steadily as it recorded everything. Somewhere in the depths of the ship, in the command quarters that no human had ever seen, Queen Zarathul reviewed the footage with growing interest. The human had broken a dozen regulations by entering the restricted area. He had interacted with her children without authorization. He had introduced foreign concepts and methods that could undermine traditional Valdari education. And, yet, as she watched her daughters laugh for the first time in months, Queen Zarathul found herself making a decision that would change the course of the war, the fate of 2 species, and the destiny of one janitor who had dared to care about alien children who reminded him of home. Marcus Chen had no idea that his simple act of kindness had just set in motion events that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. All he knew was that tomorrow, he would find a way to help Kara and Naya learn to navigate their world with confidence and joy. After all, that's what fathers do. Marcus completed his regular duties with unusual efficiency the following day, his mind occupied with thoughts of Kira and Naya. He had smuggled a small tactile learning cube from the human quarters, something he had originally bought for Emma but never sent because shipping costs were prohibitive. The device could create different textures and shapes, perfect for teaching spatial concepts to children who learn through touch. As evening approached and the ship settled into its night cycle, Marcus made his way toward the restricted residential section. He had memorized the guard rotations and knew he had a 20-minute window when the corridor would be empty. His heart hammered as he approached the children's chamber, the weight of what he was risking settling heavily on his shoulders. The door was slightly ajar again, and Marcus could hear the soft clicking sounds of Valdari conversation. He knocked gently on the frame. Kira? Naya? It's Marcus. Marcus! Naya's voice was filled with delight. Kira said you would not come back because it was too dangerous. I said it was possible he would not come back, Kara corrected, but her tone carried relief. "I did not want Naya to be disappointed if you changed your mind." Marcus entered the chamber, closing the door carefully behind him. "I brought something for you," he said, pulling out the learning cube. "It's a human teaching tool. Would you like to try it?" Both children gathered around as Marcus activated the device. The cube's surface began shifting, creating raised patterns and textures that told stories through touch. He started with simple concepts: rough and smooth, hot and cold, geometric shapes that progressed in complexity. "This is amazing," Kira breathed, her fingers dancing across the cube's surface as it created a miniature mountain range. "I can feel the landscape. It's like seeing with my hands." "That's exactly right," Marcus said. "Humans have a saying, there's more than one way to see the world." As they worked together, Marcus found himself sharing stories about Emma, adapting her experiences to concepts the alien children could understand. He talked about how Emma had learned to cope with her genetic condition, how she had found ways to excel despite her limitations. "Your daughter sounds very brave," Naya said softly. "Do you miss her?" "Every day," Marcus admitted. "But knowing she's getting the treatment she needs makes being away worth it." "Our mother misses someone too," Kira said quietly. "Our father died in the war against the Terran coalition. Mother became very angry after that. She says humans are responsible for taking him away." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Queen Zarathal had lost her mate in the ongoing conflict between the Valdari Empire and human space. No wonder she hated humans. No wonder his presence here would be seen as an unforgivable betrayal. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said carefully. "Losing someone you love is the hardest thing in the universe." "Is that why you are so kind to us?" Naya asked. "Because you understand sadness?" Before Marcus could answer, the chamber door slid open with a soft hiss. All three occupants froze as a towering figure filled the doorway. Queen Zarathal stood 8 feet tall, her forearms ending in sharp claws that could rend metal. Her compound eyes glittered with an intelligence that missed nothing, and her head crest was fully extended in what Marcus had learned indicated high alertness. She wore the deep crimson armor of Valdari royalty, and the very air around her seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. Marcus immediately moved to shield the children, his human protective instincts overriding his terror. "Please," he said in the trade language. "Don't hurt them. They did nothing wrong." Queen Zarathal's head tilted slightly, a gesture that in Valdari culture indicated surprise. "You would protect my offspring from me, human?" "I would protect any children from harm," Marcus replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "It's what we do." The queen stepped into the chamber, her massive form making the space feel suddenly cramped. Marcus tensed, expecting to be torn apart, but instead she knelt down to his eye level, still towering over him, but less intimidating. "And why," she said in perfect, unaccented human standard, "should I allow a member of the species that killed my mate to interact with my daughters?" Marcus felt the children behind him trembling, and his resolve hardened. "Because they're learning. Because they're happy. Because maybe understanding between our species starts with children who haven't learned to hate yet." Queen Zarathal was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like he was being dissected. "Show me," she said finally. "Show you what?" "Show me how you teach them. Demonstrate these human methods that have made my daughters laugh for the first time since their father's death." With shaking hands, Marcus reactivated the learning cube. "Kira, Naya, would you show your mother how the texture storytelling works?" For the next 30 minutes, Marcus guided the children through increasingly complex exercises while Queen Zarathal watched in silence. He showed them how to build three-dimensional models through touch, how to navigate spatial relationships without sight, how to use sound and texture to understand complex concepts that their traditional education had failed to convey. "The standard Valdari educational matrix assumes visual learning," the Queen said finally. "Our culture has struggled to adapt our teaching methods for those born without sight." "Every mind learns differently," Marcus said. "The key is finding the right approach for each individual child." Queen Zarathal stood slowly, her massive form casting shadows across the chamber. You risk your life to help children who are not your own. Why? Marcus looked at Kira and Naya, then back at the Queen. Because I know what it's like to watch a child struggle and feel powerless to help. Because these girls are brilliant and curious and deserve every chance to reach their potential. Because. He took a deep breath, because caring for children shouldn't depend on what species they belong to. The Queen was quiet for a long time, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's soft lighting. You spoke of your own offspring. Tell me about her condition. Marcus found himself explaining Emma's genetic disorder, the expensive treatments, his desperation to find work that paid enough to save her life. As he spoke, he noticed something change in the Queen's posture, a subtle shift that suggested she was listening not as a predator evaluating prey, but as a parent understanding another parent's pain. The medical technology available to humans is primitive compared to Valdari biotechnology, she said when he finished. Your daughter's condition would be easily treatable with our methods. I know, Marcus said quietly. But humans aren't allowed access to Valdari medical technology. No, the Queen agreed. They are not. She turned to her daughters. Kira, Naya, what do you think of the human Marcus? He is kind, Naya said immediately. He makes learning fun instead of frustrating. He sees us as individuals, not as broken Valdari, Kira added. He treats us like we are capable of great things. Queen Zarathal nodded slowly. Marcus Chen, she said, using his full name for the first time, I am going to make you an offer. You will cease your janitorial duties and become my daughter's private tutor. You will live in quarters adjacent to theirs and be responsible for their education and well-being. Marcus felt his heart leap, but caution made him hesitate. And, in return? In return, when your contract ends, you will take with you a complete Valdari medical treatment protocol for your daughter's condition. Technology worth more than your planet's entire gross domestic product. The offer was beyond anything Marcus had dared to dream. Emma could be cured completely, not just treated. But he sensed there was more to this arrangement than the Queen was revealing. There's something else, he said carefully. What aren't you telling me? A sound emerged from Queen Zarathal's throat that Marcus realized was Valdari laughter. Perceptive. Yes, there is more. My daughters will not remain hidden aboard this ship forever. They are princesses of the Valdari Empire, and, eventually they must take their place in our society. When that time comes, they will need to be extraordinary not despite their blindness, but because of how they have learned to overcome it. Marcus began to understand. You want them to prove that Valdari society is wrong about disability. To show that being different doesn't mean being less capable. Exactly. And I believe your human perspective on adapting to limitations may be exactly what they need to achieve that goal. The Queen stood to her full height. Do you accept? Marcus looked at Kira and Naya, both of them watching him with hopeful expressions. He thought about Emma, about the possibility of giving her a normal life. He thought about these two brilliant children who needed someone to believe in them. I accept, he said. Queen Zarathal's headcrest flared in what Marcus was learning to recognize as satisfaction. Excellent. Your new quarters will be prepared by tomorrow. And, Marcus? She paused at the doorway. My daughters have been happier these past 2 days than they have been since their father died. Perhaps there are things humans can teach Valdari after all. As the Queen left, Marcus felt the weight of what he had just agreed to settle on his shoulders. He was no longer just a janitor hiding in the shadows. He was now officially responsible for the education of 2 alien princesses, daughters of the galaxy's most feared military commander. But, as Kira and Naya hugged him with their forearmed embraces, chattering excitedly about all the things they wanted to learn, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just for Emma's future, but for the possibility that understanding between species might begin with something as simple as teaching children to see the world in new ways. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when a human father's love extended beyond the boundaries of species and prejudice. And it all started with 2 blind alien children who had learned to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. Marcus's new quarters were 3 times the size of his previous sleeping alcove, with a direct connection to the children's chambers and access to educational resources he hadn't known existed on the ship. Queen Zara Thal had apparently decided that if she was going to trust a human with her daughter's education, she would give him every tool available. 3 weeks into his new role as tutor, Marcus had established routines that would have seemed impossible during his janitor days. Mornings began with physical exercise adapted for non-sighted navigation, where he taught Kira and Naya to move through space using sound, touch, and spatial memory. Afternoons focused on academic subjects, but approached through tactile learning, audio processing, and three-dimensional modeling that engaged their natural Valdari abilities in new ways. The breakthrough came during a lesson on galactic navigation. Traditional Valdari navigate using visual star charts, Marcus explained as they worked with a three-dimensional holographic model of local space. But you too have an advantage. You've learned to process spatial relationships through touch and sound. You can feel the gravitational relationships between objects in ways that sighted navigators often miss. Kira ran her hands over the holographic projections, her sensitive fingers reading the gravitational fields represented by varying textures and temperatures. The star cluster here, she said, indicating a region Marcus couldn't even see clearly, it's unstable. The gravitational harmonics are creating resonance patterns that would interfere with standard navigation. Marcus checked the hologram's data readouts, then stared in amazement. You're right. The computer confirms gravitational anomalies in that region, but they're too subtle for standard sensors to detect during normal navigation scans. Naya joined her sister, both of them now mapping gravitational relationships through the hologram's tactile interface. Here too, Naya said excitedly. There's a navigation route that avoids all the major gravity wells. It would be much faster than the standard shipping lanes. Marcus watched in growing excitement as both children identified navigation opportunities and hazards that he hadn't even thought to look for. They weren't just learning to compensate for their blindness, they were developing abilities that surpassed standard Valdari navigation techniques. We need to test this, he said impulsively. Would you like to visit the navigation center? Both children went still. Humans are not allowed in ship operations areas, Kira said carefully. And we have never been permitted to observe navigation procedures. Then, it's time for that to change, Marcus said. He activated the communication panel in their chamber. Your Majesty? This is Marcus. I need to request access to the navigation center for an educational demonstration. Queen Zara Thal's voice came through the speaker within moments. Explain. Your daughters have developed navigation techniques that I believe exceed standard Valdari methods. I'd like to have them demonstrate their abilities to the navigation staff. A long pause followed. You believe my blind daughters can navigate better than trained Valdari officers? I believe they can navigate differently, and that difference might be exactly what your empire needs, Marcus replied. Will you give them the chance to prove it? An hour later, Marcus found himself in the ship's navigation center accompanied by 2 nervous alien princesses and a very skeptical Valdari crew. Navigation Officer Thekvar, a veteran with 30 years of service, looked at the unusual group with barely concealed disdain. With respect, Your Majesty, Thekvar said, his compound eyes glittering with irritation, the navigation center is not a place for children's games. And certainly not for human educational experiments. Noted, Queen Zara Thal replied coldly. Proceed with the demonstration, Marcus. Marcus guided Kira and Naya to the primary navigation console, where the holographic display showed their current sector of space. Remember what we practiced, he said quietly. Trust your abilities. Both children placed their hands on the tactile interface, and Marcus watched as years of traditional thinking began to crumble. Where the experienced navigation officer saw standard star charts and established shipping routes, Kira and Naya perceived gravitational flows, subspace currents, and spatial relationships that created entirely new possibilities. The route to the Kelvers system, Naya said after several minutes of exploration. The standard path follows the established shipping lane, but there's a faster route through the Helix Nebula if you account for the gravitational tides. The Helix Nebula is classified as hazardous to navigation, Thekvar objected. The gravitational anomalies make it too dangerous for standard vessels. Only if you try to fight the anomalies instead of using them, Kira replied. She began tracing a path through the hologram that made Marcus's breath catch. See? The gravitational tides create natural acceleration corridors. If you time the entry correctly and adjust for the tidal variations, you can reduce travel time by 30% while actually using less fuel. Thekvar leaned forward, his skepticism replaced by growing amazement as he checked the calculations. The mathematics are correct, he admitted grudgingly. But the precision required would be beyond most navigators. Not if you can feel the gravitational flows instead of just seeing them, Naya said simply. We experience space differently than you do. Queen Zarathal moved closer to the navigation console, her massive form radiating intense focus. Show me the route to the Terran border. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. The Terran border was where the Valdari Empire and human space met in an uneasy ceasefire. It was also where the Queen's mate had died in the last major battle between their species. Kira and Naya worked together, their forehands mapping currents and flows that existed beyond normal perception. There are 3 standard routes, Kira said finally. But they all require passage through heavily monitored space where both sides maintain military patrols. However, Naya continued, there's a path through the dark nebula that both sides consider impassable. The sensor interference and gravitational anomalies make it a navigation nightmare. Unless you navigate by gravitational touch instead of visual sensors, Kira finished. We could map a route through the dark nebula that would allow completely undetected passage to the Terran border. The navigation center went absolutely silent. Marcus realized he had just witnessed the children discover a military advantage that could change the balance of power between the two species. A route that allowed undetected movement could be used for reconnaissance, surprise attacks, or other purposes. Fascinating, Queen Zarathal said softly. And what would you do with such a route? Both children looked confused by the question. We would explore, Naya said simply. There might be new star systems to discover, or phenomena to study. You wouldn't use it for military advantage, the Queen pressed. Why would we? Kira asked. Navigation should be about connecting worlds, not isolating them. Marcus watched Queen Zarathal's expression change as she processed her daughter's response. These children, raised in the heart of a military empire, had just demonstrated strategic capabilities that exceeded their military's current abilities. And their first instinct wasn't conquest or revenge, but exploration and connection. Thank you for the demonstration, the Queen said finally. Officer Thekvar, you will work with my daughters to develop their navigation techniques into formal training protocols. I want a full report on the military applications within 2 weeks. As they left the navigation center, Marcus felt a mixture of pride and unease. Kira and Naya had proven they were extraordinary, but he worried about how their abilities might be used. The Queen had asked about military applications, and he couldn't forget that they were still technically at war with his own species. That evening, as they debriefed the day's events, Naya asked a question that would haunt Marcus for weeks to come. Marcus, why did Mother ask about using our navigation skills for war? Shouldn't knowing how to travel between worlds make it easier to make peace instead? Marcus looked at both children, these brilliant alien princesses who had begun to see him as a father figure, and realized he was facing an impossible situation. He was helping them develop abilities that could give their empire a decisive advantage over humanity. But he was also teaching them values that might make them question whether that advantage should be used. That's a very good question, he said finally. What do you think? I think, Kira said slowly, that being able to reach someone doesn't automatically make you enemies. Maybe it just makes it easier to understand each other. But what if they don't want to understand? Naya asked. What if they want to hurt people you care about? Marcus felt the weight of the question, knowing it reflected the core conflict between their species. Then, you have to decide what kind of person you want to be, he said. Someone who uses their abilities to build bridges, or someone who uses them to build walls. What kind of person are you, Marcus? Kira asked quietly. Marcus thought about Emma, about Queen Zarathal's offer of medical technology, about the impossible position he found himself in. "I'm trying to be the kind of person who protects children," he said. "All children. Even when it's complicated." As the children settled down for sleep, Marcus stood at the viewing port in his quarters, looking out at the stars that separated him from his daughter. He had come here as a desperate father seeking to save his child. He had become a teacher helping alien children discover abilities that could reshape the galaxy. But he was beginning to realize that his greatest challenge wasn't going to be education or even navigation. It was going to be helping two brilliant children decide how to use their extraordinary gifts in a universe where their mother commanded one of the most powerful military forces known to exist. The revolution he was teaching them might not be the one Queen Zarathal expected. And Marcus wasn't sure whether that would save both their species or destroy everything he had worked to build. The crisis began with a routine communication from Earth that changed everything Marcus thought he knew about his situation. He was reviewing lesson plans in his quarters when Queen Zarathal's voice crackled through the communication system. "Marcus Chen, report to my private chamber immediately." Marcus had never been summoned to the Queen's personal quarters before. As he made his way through corridors he had once cleaned, now walking as an honored member of the household, he tried to imagine what could require his presence. His teaching contract was progressing well, the children were excelling beyond all expectations, and their navigation discoveries had begun revolutionizing Valdari fleet operations. The Queen's chamber was surprisingly modest compared to the grand public spaces of the ship. Personal artifacts decorated the walls, weapons that had belonged to her mate, holographic images of her family before the war, and detailed star charts marking every battle in the ongoing conflict with human space. Queen Zarathal stood before a massive viewing port, her silhouette dark against the starfield. "Your planet has made contact," she said without turning around. "They wish to negotiate for your release." Marcus felt his heart stop. "Release? I'm not a prisoner." "Are you not?" The Queen turned to face him, her compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "You are a human civilian working aboard a Valdari military vessel during wartime. By the laws of both our species, you are technically a prisoner of war, regardless of your voluntary contract." "I don't understand." "The contract was legal, approved by both governments." "The contract was a convenient fiction," Queen Zarathal interrupted. "Useful for maintaining plausible deniability while I evaluated whether humans could be trusted with significant responsibilities." She gestured to a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room. "Earth has discovered that my daughters have developed strategic navigation capabilities. They want you back, and they want to ensure that human interests are protected." Marcus stared at the display, which showed military communications between Earth Command and various intelligence agencies. His name appeared throughout the documents, along with detailed analyses of what his position aboard the Valdari flagship might mean for human security. "They think I'm a spy," he said numbly. "They think you're a valuable asset who might be giving military secrets to their enemies," the Queen corrected. "And they're not entirely wrong. You have helped my daughters develop capabilities that could end the war decisively in our favor." Marcus felt the walls of the chamber closing in around him. "What do you want from me?" Queen Zarathal moved closer, her massive form radiating controlled tension. "I want to know where your loyalties lie. Your daughter's medical treatments have been fully funded through our arrangement. You could return to Earth now, take the Valdari medical technology one promised you, and resume your life with your child cured and your obligations fulfilled. But my daughters have become attached to you. More than attached, you have become a father figure to them in ways I did not anticipate." The Queen's voice carried a note of vulnerability Marcus had never heard before. "They speak of you constantly. They have begun asking why humans and Valdari must be enemies when you have shown them kindness they never experienced from their own species." Marcus realized he was being offered a choice that would define not just his future, but potentially the future of human-Valdari relations. "What are you asking me to do?" "I am asking you to choose," Queen Zarathal said simply. "Return to Earth and your daughter, with the medical technology that will save her life. Or stay with my daughters and help me prepare them for a role that will reshape both our civilizations. What kind of role? The Queen activated another holographic display, this one showing star charts and territorial boundaries. The war between our species has reached a stalemate. Neither side can achieve decisive victory without catastrophic losses. But my daughters have shown me something I had not considered before, a third option. Marcus studied the display, seeing shipping routes, military positions, and resource distribution patterns. I'm not a military strategist. I don't understand what you're showing me. My daughter's navigation discoveries could break the stalemate in either direction. They could help the Valdari Empire achieve complete victory over human space, or... She paused significantly, they could create opportunities for unprecedented cooperation between our species. You're talking about peace. I am talking about survival, the Queen corrected. Both our species face external threats that neither can handle alone. The Devourers are moving through the outer rim, consuming entire star systems. The Void-Touched are corrupting trade routes in the galactic core. We have been so focused on fighting each other that we have ignored dangers that could destroy us both. Marcus began to understand the larger picture. You want your daughters to become ambassadors. I want my daughters to become something that has never existed before, leaders who can see beyond the limitations of their own species. Queen Zarathal moved to stand beside Marcus, both of them looking out at the stars. But they cannot do that alone. They need someone who understands both worlds, someone who can help them navigate not just space, but the complex politics of interspecies cooperation. You want me to stay and help you raise them to lead a new kind of diplomacy. I want you to help me raise them to survive what's coming, the Queen said quietly. Because the alternative is extinction for both our species. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lighting bathed the chamber in harsh red illumination, and the Queen's communication system activated automatically. Your Majesty, came the voice of the ship's tactical officer, we have detected a massive distortion in subspace. Unknown vessels are approaching from the dark nebula. Queen Zarathal's headcrest flared in alarm. Impossible. Nothing can navigate the dark nebula. Unless, Marcus said with growing horror, you've learned to navigate by gravitational touch instead of visual sensors. Both of them realized the implications simultaneously. The navigation techniques that Kira and Naya had developed, the routes through previously impassable space, the military applications that the Queen had ordered studied, someone had been listening. Someone had learned their secrets. Battle stations, the Queen commanded. Prepare for possible hostile contact. She turned to Marcus, her compound eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and regret. It appears your choice has been made for you. If we are about to face an enemy that can navigate the impossible, we will need every advantage we can find. Marcus felt his heart pounding as he realized what was happening. Kara and Naya. They're the only ones who can counter navigation that uses their techniques. Yes, the Queen said grimly. My daughters may be about to transition from students to strategic assets much sooner than I had planned. As they rushed toward the children's quarters, Marcus found himself hoping that the lessons he had taught them about seeing beyond limitations would serve them well. Because they were about to face a test that would determine whether the future held cooperation between species or the complete destruction of everything they had worked to build. The unknown ships emerging from the dark nebula carried implications that neither human nor Valdari had anticipated. And two blind alien princesses, guided by a human father who had taught them to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles, might be the only hope for survival in a galaxy that had suddenly become far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The choice between worlds was no longer Marcus's to make. The worlds themselves were about to choose whether they would stand together or fall apart. And everything depended on whether two extraordinary children could use their gifts to navigate not just space, but the treacherous currents of interspecies survival. The enemy ships that emerged from the dark nebula were unlike anything in the databases of either human or Valdari space. They moved with impossible grace through gravitational fields that should have torn them apart, their hulls seeming to bend and flow like liquid metal. Most disturbing of all, they navigated with the same intuitive mastery of spatial relationships that Marcus had taught Kira and Naya. "They're using our techniques," Kira whispered as she ran her hands over the tactical display in the command center. Queen Zarathul had brought both children to the bridge when it became clear that conventional navigation couldn't track the intruders' movements. But they're doing it wrong. They're forcing their way through space instead of flowing with it. Marcus watched the tactical display with growing unease. The unknown ships were definitely using gravitational navigation techniques, but their approach was aggressive, almost violent. Where Kira and Naya had learned to work with spatial currents, these newcomers seemed to be tearing through them by brute force. "Who are they?" Naya asked, her sensitive fingers tracing the energy signatures of the alien vessels. "Unknown," Queen Zarathul replied tersely. "No configuration in our databases, no response to communication attempts." She paused, studying her daughters as they worked. "Can you predict their movement patterns?" Both children worked together over the holographic display, their four hands mapping gravitational flows and spatial relationships with the intuitive mastery they had developed under Marcus's guidance. After several tense minutes, Kira looked up with a troubled expression. "They're not just navigating toward us," she said quietly. "They're hurting us. Their movement pattern is designed to force us into a specific region of space." "A trap?" the Queen asked. "Or a testing ground," Naya added. "The gravitational configuration they're driving us toward would make escape impossible using conventional navigation, but not impossible using your techniques," Marcus finished, understanding dawning on him. "They want to see what we can do." Before anyone could respond, a new alarm sounded. "Additional contacts," the tactical officer reported. "Human vessels approaching from the opposite vector. 3 destroyers and a heavy cruiser." Marcus felt his blood freeze. "Earth ships. They've come for me." Queen Zarathul's headcrest flared in anger. "So we are to be caught between unknown aliens and your suspicious government. Excellent." But, as the human ships drew closer, their formation began to shift in response to the alien threat. Instead of moving to engage the Valdari flagship, they took up defensive positions that suggested they recognized the unknown vessels as the greater danger. "This is Captain Sarah Martinez of the UEF Determination," came a transmission on the standard diplomatic frequency. "Queen Zarathul, we request permission to coordinate defensive operations against the unidentified hostiles." The bridge fell silent. In over a century of conflict between humans and Valdari, there had never been a request for military cooperation. Marcus watched Queen Zarathul process this unprecedented development, her compound eyes reflecting rapid calculations. "Your response, Your Majesty," the communications officer asked. Queen Zarathul looked at her daughters, still working over the tactical display with the human who had become their teacher and surrogate father. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what do you recommend?" Marcus felt the weight of both species' futures settling on his shoulders. "I recommend we give them a chance to prove that cooperation is possible," he said. "Because I think those unknown ships aren't just testing our navigation abilities. They're testing whether we can work together." "Granted," the Queen said into the communication system. "Captain Martinez, you are authorized to coordinate with our tactical operations. We have strategic navigation capabilities that may be essential to countering the alien advantage." What followed was the most extraordinary hour in recorded galactic history. Human and Valdari crews worked together for the first time, sharing tactical data and coordinating maneuvers against an enemy that used their own greatest discovery against them. Kira and Naya became the central coordinators of a joint operation, their unique abilities allowing both fleets to navigate spatial configurations that would have been impossible using standard techniques. "The aliens are adapting," Kira reported as the battle progressed. "They're learning from our movements and improving their own navigation techniques." "But they're still using force instead of finesse," Naya added. "They can copy our methods, but they don't understand the philosophy behind them." Marcus watched his students work with the tactical teams from both species, translating their intuitive understanding of space into coordinates and vectors that human and Valdari navigators could follow. These children, who had never seen a battle before today, were orchestrating the most complex multi-species military operation in galactic history. There, Kira said suddenly, her hands indicating a region of space that looked empty on all sensors. The gravitational confluence point. They've been driving us toward it because it's the only place in this region where multiple gravitational currents intersect. A natural amplification point, Naya continued. If we can reach it first and position our ships correctly, we can use the gravitational streams to create a barrier they can't force their way through. Captain Martinez's voice came through the communication system. That's a hell of a risky maneuver. If the timing is off, those gravitational streams will tear our ships apart. Not if you trust us to guide you, Kira said simply. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Two blind alien children, guided by the educational philosophy of a human father figure, coordinated a joint human Valdari fleet through gravitational currents that required perfect timing and absolute trust between species that had been enemies for over a century. The unknown alien ships found themselves trapped in gravitational fields they couldn't navigate by force, their aggressive approach to spatial manipulation rendering them helpless against currents that required cooperation rather than domination. As their ships were caught in gravitational streams that pulled them back into the dark nebula, a final transmission came through on all frequencies, cooperation acknowledged. Test parameters satisfied. Species evaluation, promising. Further contact will be established when mutual development warrants assessment. As the alien ships disappeared back into the dark nebula, both human and Valdari fleets found themselves staring at each other across space that had just witnessed the impossible, two enemy species working together to face a common threat. Well, Captain Martinez said into the sudden silence, that was educational. Queen Zarathul looked at Marcus, who was holding both her daughter's hands as they recovered from the strain of the navigation coordination. It would seem, she said slowly, that the galaxy has more surprises for us than either species anticipated. And more reasons for cooperation than we realized, Marcus added. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the first joint human Valdari research station, watching ships from both species working together to establish humanity's first permanent presence in formerly neutral space. Emma was with him, completely cured by Valdari medical technology and fascinated by her first meeting with Kira and Naya. The negotiations that led to the cooperation accords had been complex, but they were built on a foundation that neither species could deny. When faced with threats that neither could handle alone, human ingenuity and Valdari strength created possibilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. So what happens now? Emma asked as she watched her father's alien students demonstrate their navigation techniques for a mixed group of human and Valdari cadets. Now we learn, Marcus said. We explore. We discover what's possible when different species decide to see the universe through each other's eyes. Kira approached them, her spatial senses allowing her to navigate perfectly despite her blindness. Marcus, the Galactic Council has approved funding for the new Navigation Academy. They want you to head the interspecies education program. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about how far he had come from being a desperate father cleaning floors on an alien warship. What do you think? Should we teach the galaxy that there's more than one way to see the universe? I think, Naya said, joining the group with the easy confidence she had developed under Marcus's guidance, that the universe is much bigger and more interesting than any of us imagined. And I think there are children from dozens of species who could benefit from learning that being different is just another way of being extraordinary. Emma grinned up at her father. Can I help teach them, Dad? Marcus looked at his daughter, healthy and excited about a future that included friends from species he had never imagined meeting. He looked at Kira and Naya, two alien princesses who had become the daughters of his heart. He looked out at space where human and Valdari ships worked together to build something unprecedented. I think, he said, that we're all going to learn together. The galaxy had tested them with threats and challenges beyond anything they had imagined. But it had also given them something neither species had expected to find, a family that transcended the boundaries of biology, politics, and prejudice. Marcus Chen had come to the stars as a janitor desperate to save his daughter. He had become a teacher, a father to alien children, and a bridge between species that had thought cooperation was impossible. But, most importantly, he had learned that love for your own children and for all children was the most powerful force in the universe. Strong enough to cross the void between stars, and strong enough to unite species that had forgotten how to see the universe through anything other than their own eyes. The revolution had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And it all began with a human father who dared to care about alien children who reminded him of home.